Ladies and gentlemen, this was the day the world almost ended by the channel RealLifeLore. Yes, another fun topic like this. RealLifeLore excels at the topics like this, so it's going to be fun. I already quite a few RealLifeLore videos already. If you haven't seen them, check out the cast. There's a playlist I created for it. RealLifeLore reactions, something like that, with all of my RealLifeLore reactions, I guess. Check out the playlist too, like Internet Historian, CGP Grey, History, Oversimplified, Oli Sakashi Production. I upload quite a few videos, you know, if you go to my channel, that's all of the videos are there. It's just hard to navigate, so that's why I created all the playlists, so check that out. So yeah, let's do this one.
This video was made possible by Skillshare. Learn anything with Skillshare for free for 2 months by being one of the first 500 people to sign up using the link below. October 27th, 1962 is the most important date in human history that nobody really knows about.
Okay.
It was the day that human civilization came the closest that it's ever been to being totally annihilated. If events had gone slightly differently that day, or one man had made a different decision, it's very likely that you would never have existed in the first place. And even if you did, the world you know today in 2019 would more closely resemble Fallout than our own. Because on October 27th, 1962, the world...
Okay, really? So there would be death clause? Really? There would be death clause, it would be like Fallout? No, I'm pretty sure there's going to be death alligators, right? They will all rise up from Florida and rule the world.
Came the closest it's ever been to full-out nuclear war. The circumstances that almost led to disaster began 3 years previously in 1959, when the previous government of Cuba was overthrown by a new Marxist Communist Party that became...
Oh, alright, Cuban Missile Crisis is talking about the submarine, right? They thought the war is started because there was real communication error between Soviet Union and the submarine. So they thought the war has started. So the two of the officer basically you require 2 votes, right? 2 people to spin the key to launch a missile. So both of them were agreement, like we should launch the missile. But the captain of the ship, who also gets the vote, said no. And just because captain said no, others, I guess he had more say in it, right? Otherwise 2-1, I don't remember exactly what it was, but because he said no, we can't just launch a missile on a hunch, and said no to those 2 officers who supposedly has the power to launch missile. But since he's a captain, he has more power and more say in it. He said no, we can't do that. We can't just launch missile on a hunch. So they came on the surface, and then realized, oh, wait a minute, no, the war did not start it. And they just surrendered. Because of one guy, I forgot his name. Otherwise, there would be a nuclear missile would have launched from the submarine to US mainland. And then, even if it was a mistake, and even if the Soviet Union would say that was a mistake, obviously as a retaliation, US would launch the missile and so on and so forth. I don't know if the world would have ended, but I'm pretty sure major countries would have hit because of the, US would attack Soviet Union would attack US, and allies would attack each other. So most of the world would have been fucked. So yeah, I think economy would have completely gone, right? Because of the devastation that would happen. And no, the world wouldn't have been like it is right now. So one guy literally saved the world. He's not a national hero, he's a global hero.
The first country in the Western Hemisphere to openly ally with the Soviet Union. A communist country just 90 miles away from Florida was unacceptable to the US government at the time, and multiple attempts by the American government to assassinate Castro or overthrow his government, like the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, all failed. The American-sponsored but half-hearted invasion at the Bay of Pigs convinced Castro that the Americans were going to try and launch a full-scale invasion of Cuba at some point in the future. And so Castro was getting closer and closer in his alliance with the USSR. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, was concerned...
Oh, okay, so because of Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba by USA, right? I still don't know what that is. I have to react to one of the videos, I guess, about Bay of Pigs. But because of that, Castro aligned himself with the Soviet Union. Because I always thought that, okay, why did Castro align himself with the Soviet Union by being this close to USA?
Not only with the possibility of an American invasion of Cuba, but also with the recent deployments of American nuclear missiles in Italy, and more alarmingly to them, in Turkey. The missiles here were within striking distance of Ukraine and southern Russia itself. And America possessed 170 ICBMs on the American mainland capable of striking anywhere inside of the USSR. The Soviets, at the same time, only possessed a few dozen ICBMs. And besides that, they had no possible ability to strike the US mainland itself. The solution to balance out this disparity in attack capability in the eyes of the Soviets was obvious. They had thousands of medium and short-range nuclear missiles that couldn't hit the US from anywhere inside of the Soviet Union. So, why not begin putting these missiles in the territory of their new allies in Cuba that could then threaten to strike pretty much anywhere inside of America, just like the Americans had done by placing their missiles in Turkey? The problem was, the Soviets weren't sure how the Americans would react to nuclear missiles 90 miles away from their coast, so they began moving them in absolute secrecy starting in September 1962. It was the start of the most dangerous gamble that humanity has ever played, with the entire fate of the world literally at stake. And for the first time in America's history, she faced the same threat that nearly every other country in the world has faced for centuries.
Yeah, Cuban Missile Crisis was literally the peak of the panic everybody had during the Manhattan Project. In the Manhattan Project, they created nukes and they were scared. Even the creator was scared, like, okay, I just basically fucked the world or something, right? And that peaked at Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what that was. The missiles reached at its peak and two superpowers were at each other's throat. And, obviously USA put missiles at Turkey, so Soviet Union put it on, Cuba to balance things out. But that also created this kind of a real crisis that everybody came at each other's throat. And because of miscommunication, the war almost happened, right? Because of just one guy said, fuck that, we're not going to do that. But there was real miscommunication. That's why, there was a direct line between Moscow and United States, was founded after that. Because there was real miscommunication. There was a lag between it, right? When message reaches and what they decide.
A very real threat of total annihilation by an external power. The first photographic evidence of Soviet missiles by American spy planes flying over Cuba was acquired on October 14th. President Kennedy was notified on October 16th when he called a meeting to discuss the American response options. They included doing nothing, using diplomacy to pressure the Soviets to withdraw, threatening Castro with an invasion, blockading Cuba to prevent any new missiles from arriving, using airstrikes to destroy the known missile site locations, or using the US military to launch a full-scale invasion of Cuba to destroy the missile sites and overthrow Castro and his regime. The American Joint Chiefs of Staff were unanimous in their approval of the invasion option, but only Kennedy disagreed. Unknown to them, Castro himself was convinced that America was planning on invading and urged the Soviets to fire a preemptive nuclear strike on American cities in preparation for it. The Soviet leader Khrushchev hesitated on his side, while Kennedy hesitated on his own side. Imagine how different the course of events may have been with any other world leaders who might have more easily fallen into peer pressure, but neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev did, although both prepared for war. Kennedy authorized a limited blockade of Cuba on October 22nd that was stopping any ship traveling suspected of...
Okay, basically, Castro didn't want Soviet missiles on his land. But, obviously Khrushchev basically convinced him to do that. Once he did that, after the crisis began, the Soviet Union was basically, going back and forth, like, should we do this? Should we not do this? And then, Castro was kind of pissed off, like, are you kidding me? I said no to you, and now you're not even sure what to do. Where USA sees me as an enemy, and USA will invade me. So that's why he was kind of pissed off.
Carrying weapons. Khrushchev announced that the Soviets would be ignoring this blockade, and for the first time in US history, the nuclear alert system was raised to DEFCON 2, just one step before all-out nuclear war would be declared. And for the only time in US history, nuclear bombers went on continuous 24-hour alert with several orbiting the USSR itself, ready to drop the nukes on a 15-minute notice. 145 American ICBMs were armed and made ready to launch, with several aimed directly at Cuba. On October 25th, the Soviets began challenging the US blockade and even getting a few ships slipped past. On October 26th, the US began making full preparations to invade Cuba, while on the same day,
that plane is way too close to the ship, man.
Castro continued to urge the Soviets in a telegram to launch the nuclear first strike against America. And then, finally, in this atmosphere of extreme tension, the day of October 27th came that decided the fate of the entire world right up until our current time. A Soviet submarine flotilla had managed to slip past the blockade of Cuba undetected sometime previously. But on October 27th, one of these subs, B-59, was discovered by the Americans. A squad of 11 American destroyers and one aircraft carrier pursued the Soviet sub and it dived further underwater. In order to signal they wanted the submarine to resurface and positively identify itself as a part of the blockade, one of the American destroyers began dropping practice dummy depth charges on B-59. These couldn't possibly hurt the submarine because they were just dummies, but the Soviet crew on board didn't know that. They assumed that the charges were real, and since
Oh yeah, I forgot that. That's what happened, right? The blockade was basically dropping those, those bombs that they drop, which is supposed to be shock factor. So submarine would realize that they're found, so they resurface. That's the strategy they use. But obviously the submarine didn't know that, and they knew that the war could break out any moment. That's how they were deployed in the first place. Now being in the submarine, right, with no communication to anyone, and suddenly getting shaken up by all the bombs and entire submarine sinking because of that, they will think, holy shit, the war broke out.
Since they had lost contact with Moscow several days previously, most of them assumed that war may have already started back above the surface. Their submarine was armed with a T-5 torpedo tipped with a 5-kiloton nuclear warhead. If war had truly begun back above the surface like they believed, and the nukes had already been fired, then it wouldn't matter if they fired their nuclear torpedo against the American ships that seemed to be attacking them. There were 3 officers on board that all had to agree on deploying a nuclear weapon, and while 2 of them did agree, the third, named Vasily Arkhipov, was the sole man who disagreed. Arkhipov was the commander of the whole Soviet submarine flotilla, and he just happened to choose by chance to be aboard B-59. Usually,
he was in charge of entire flotilla. Damn.
Deployment of a nuclear weapon on a Soviet submarine only required the authorization of the 2 most senior ranking commanders on board, the captain and the political officer. Had Arkhipov not been present, these 2 who were in favor of the nuclear option would have had their way and it would have been fired. The presence of Arkhipov on board by mere chance meant that his approval was also required though, and he stood alone and disagreed against the peer pressure of his fellow officers. Eventually they relented, and desperate for air after being underwater for so long, they resurfaced and returned back to the Soviet Union. But had things gone differently, if Arkhipov made a different decision, whether he fell into peer pressure or if he simply chose a different submarine to be present on, you probably wouldn't exist, and neither would the internet or probably anything else that you know.
Okay, which place they would have, if they would have bombed some city, which city would they bomb, right? They're close to Cuba, so they would have bombed Miami or Florida, right? First thing they would bomb, I'm pretty sure.
5-kiloton torpedo was about 1/3 the power of the Hiroshima bomb, and it probably would have destroyed most of that American naval squadron, killing thousands of American sailors and destroying a dozen ships, including an aircraft carrier. Under the tense atmosphere that was already present, it's believable to assume that the Americans would have responded by launching a nuclear strike of their own against Cuba and maybe even the USSR, leading down the path to apocalypse and an early real-life version of Fallout.
Yeah.
So remember to thank Vasily Arkhipov for unknowingly saving your life and our world 57 years ago. Don't take another day afterwards for granted. To make the most out of the time that you have, it's nice to do something productive or learn a new set of skills.
Yeah, people, go to skillset.com/RealLifeLore 22 and support this channel. Yeah, this thing only tells me just simple fact that our world is basically held together by thin layers of events here and there. Anything could set off the next bombing and world wars, right? I mean, USA was transporting bombs and they basically mistakenly dropped the bombs on their mainland, right? Obviously detonator wasn't there, but if it had been there, if something would have gone wrong, they would have bombed their own fucking country, right? There's a Soviet Union basically, while transporting bombs, thrown some bomb in Himalayas, or same thing USA did. There are so many stories and incidents that could have gone bad just like this. And God knows how many incidents are happening today and has happened in past few years and will happen in the future, right? I mean, somebody could create a massive particle accelerator and create some kind of black hole that goes out of hand and basically sucks in the entire planet. There's so many things that could go wrong and wipe out the entire civilization, entire world. We are at that scale now, that scale of humanity. With the creation of nukes, we already harness the power of the sun. There is nothing bigger than that, right? We might be primitive, right? We might be primitive humans, because we can't create Dyson sphere and all the advanced shit that they saw in the sci-fi movies and things, and that is theoretically possible. In that sense, we are just primitive, right? But because of the nuke is just, you're basically creating a small sun. There is nothing more powerful than that. So as weapons goes, we created one of the most powerful weapons there can be. So anything could go wrong at any time. So who knows? This is why people say that humans probably will kill themselves, right? Lifespan of humans are not going to be that long just because we are smarter. Dinosaur, all the time we've been alive, dinosaurs have lived much longer than we did, and sometimes people even think that we probably won't even make at the dinosaur lifespan level. Well, people, this was the day the world almost ended. One guy saved it, right? Global hero, not a national hero, global hero. Otherwise, the world was fucked. This is my channel, Real Life Lore. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the Rick Sanity. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards for replacing the cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.